AHDAWAM. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabashai, Bahashem, Rachakudash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, because those are the men who I learned this truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabashai. Yahweh is the true name of the God of Israel. Yahabashai is who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one and only true name is Yahabashai. And pretty much this is going to be a follow-up video to the video I did about Elijah having supernatural abilities, aka spiritual power, that was given unto him by Yahweh, the God of Israel. Now we're going to read the account in 2 Kings. When Elijah was taken up, Elisha, he received a double portion. All right, so all the miracles that Elijah did, Elisha did it, and he did more miracles. All right, so without further ado, we're gonna get into it. But before I get into Elisha's miracles, I just want to show you the verses where everything was spiritual, like Elijah putting his mantle on him. You know, it's spiritual. You know, certain things that we may do, a brother may say, hold a garment. I start thinking about the scriptures. Even like the littlest things, I think about the scriptures. Or you read the scriptures and you think about certain things that brothers just do, or something that you done. All right? Because we're Jews. These customs is in us. So let's get into it, right? So I typed in Elisha supernatural powers, aka spiritual power, right? Elisha was a major Old Testament prophet who inherited a double portion of his mentor Elijah's prophetic spirit. Known for performing more miraculous deeds than any other biblical prophet, his supernatural abilities included miraculous healings, curing Naaman, which he was Syrian, leprosy, resurrecting the dead, the Shunammite's son, supernatural provision, aka multiplying oil and bread, and clairvoyance, revealing hidden enemy movements. So all these different supernatural abilities, aka spiritual power, that you read about from the different men of the Lord, we're going to have all these powers and then some when we step into that new covenant first, by getting those new bodies. All right, that's prophesied in 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter, and all over the New Testament. So let's go down here. It says the supernatural powers and miracles attributed to Elisha in the Bible span several distinct categories. Power over nature, parting waters. Elisha used Elijah's mantle to part the Jordan River, mirroring his mentor's miracle, right? And then the generation before him, who does that make you think of? Moses, right? That don't mean that they're the same person, but it goes to show you that when you read the scriptures, the Most High, he gave his supernatural abilities to these different prophets, all right, for the purpose of ultimately what? Glorifying Yahweh, the God of Israel. And then later on down the line, in the New Testament, glorifying Yahweh and Yahabashai, because whenever Yahabashai did miracles, he gave all praise, honor, and glory to the entity that gave him that power, which is Yahweh, the God of Israel, right? It says purifying water. He purified a toxic spring in Jericho by tossing salt into it. Floating iron. He miraculously caused a heavy borrowed iron axe head to float on the surface of the Jordan River. It says provision and multiplication. The widow's oil. Elisha caused a small jar of a widow's olive oil to multiply continuously so she could sell it and save her sons from slavery, feeding the multitude. He fed 100 men with just 20 small loaves of barley bread and some grain, leaving food left over. Purifying stew. He neutralized a poisonous stew for a group of prophets by tossing meal, aka flour, into the pot. Healing and resurrection. Healing of Naaman. Elisha instructed Naaman, a Syrian commander, to wash in the Jordan River 7 times. 7 representing completion, right? To cure his leprosy. Resurrection of the Shulamite son, right? After a wealthy woman's son died, Elisha prayed and stretched himself over the boy, restoring him to life. Resurrection after the dead. Yahweh's power remained with Elisha even after his death. A dead man thrown into Elisha's tomb was instantly resurrected when his corpse touched Elisha's bones. It says welfare, judgment, and clairvoyance. Supernatural sight. Elisha prayed for his servant's eyes to be open, allowing the servant to see a spiritual army of horses and chariots of fire protecting them, which is so-called UFOs. He saw a fleet of so-called UFOs, which who operates the so-called UFOs? The angels of Yahweh Yahushua. All right? Protecting them. Blinding enemies. He supernaturally struck the Armenian or Aramean army with blindness to protect Israel, later restoring their sight. Prophecy. He accurately predicted weather events, the ends of famines, and the ascension of new kings. Judgment. In a well-known and severe judgment, Elisha cursed a group of youths who mocked him, resulting in 2 bears mauling them. All right? So, you don't play with a prophet. You don't mock a prophet. You know, next thing you know, your call don't work. You gotta watch what you say, no matter who you are, even including myself. I gotta watch what I say, right? So now let's deal with this now. So this is 1 Kings chapter 19, and I'm gonna start at 19. But let's read this in the NLT version. NLT, 1 Kings 19 and 19. And this is dealing with the call of Elisha. So Elisha went and found, let me read that again. 1 Kings 19 and 19. So Elijah went and found Elisha, son of Shaphat, plowing a field. There were 12 teams of oxen in the field, and Elisha was plowing with the 12th team. Elijah went over to him and threw his cloak across his shoulders and then walked away. Elisha left the oxen standing there, ran after Elijah, and said to him, "First, let me go and kiss my father and mother goodbye, and then I will go with you." Elijah replied, "Go on back, but think about what I have done to you." It says, so Elisha returned to his oxen and slaughtered them. He used the wood from the plow to build a fire to roast their flesh. So fresh food right there, freshly killed, right? That's how your food should be served. It says, he passed around the meat to the townspeople, and they all ate. Then he went with Elijah as his assistant. I want to read that in the KJV. Let's see what's the other word they got there. All right. It says, and minister unto him, which is pretty much the same thing. He was his understudy. That's the point. All right. Now, let's read this whole chapter. This is dealing with Elijah taken into heaven and how Elisha will receive a double portion, meaning all the miracles and all the supernatural feats that Elijah had, Elisha will be able to do it in greater, because it would be a double portion of what Elijah did before Elisha. So NLT version, Elijah taken into heaven. This is the headline. This is what these verses getting ready to go into. 2 Kings 2:1. When the Lord, now the word Lord is in caps, so that's the name of the God of Israel, Yahweh, was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, being a so-called UFO, the tractor beam, right? Elijah and Elisha were traveling from Gilgal, and Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for Yahweh has told me to go to Bethel." But Elisha replied, "As surely as Yahweh lives, and you yourself live, I will never leave you. So they went down together to Bethel. That's why I read the what I read before in 1 Kings 19 from verses 19 to 21, because that was Elisha's calling. All right, his calling was to minister unto Elijah, to follow him, to be his assistant. Right? It says, continuing on, right? I'm gonna read again. Verse 2, NLT, and Elijah said to Elisha, stay here, for Yahweh has told me to go to Bethel. But Elisha replied, as surely as Yahweh lives and you yourself live, I will never leave you. So they went down together to Bethel. The group of prophets from Bethel came to Elisha and asked him, did you know that Yahweh is going to take your master away from you today? Of course I know. Elisha answered, but be quiet about it. Because he loved his teacher, right? It says, then Elijah said to Elisha, stay here, for Yahweh has told me to go to Jericho. But Elisha replied again, as surely as Yahweh lives and you yourself live, I will never leave you. So they went on together to Jericho. Why? Because that was Elisha's calling, to minister unto Elijah. No matter where Elijah went or what the Lord told strictly only Elijah, is spiritual. Elisha had to be there too. This is what the Most High predestinated. All right. So continuing on, verse 5. Then the group of prophets from Jericho came to Elisha and asked him, did you know that Yahweh is going to take your master away from you today? Of course I know, Elisha answered, but be quiet about it. Then Elijah said to Elisha, stay here, for Yahweh has told me to go to the Jordan River. But again, Elisha replied, as surely as Yahweh lives and you yourself live, I will never leave you. So they went on together. 50 men from the group of prophets also went and watched from a distance as Elijah and Elisha stopped beside the Jordan River. Then Elijah folded his cloak together and struck the water with it. The river divided, and the two of them went across on dry ground. That's supernatural what he did. It says, when they came to the other side, Elijah said to Elisha, tell me what I can do for you before I am taken away. And Elisha replied, please let me inherit a double share or double portion of your spirit and become your successor. You have asked a difficult thing, Elijah replied. If you see me when I am taken from you, then you will get your request. Now, why is that? Because that was his job, to assist and minister unto Elijah to the day that he couldn't do it no more on the planet Earth. So it says, but if not, then you won't. Right? As they were walking along and talking, suddenly a chariot of fire, so-called UFO, appeared, drawn by horses of fire. It drove between the two men, separating them, and Elijah was carried by a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha saw it and cried out, my father, I see the chariots and charioteers of Israel, right? The angels inside the so-called UFOs, right? And as they disappeared from sight, Elisha tore his clothes in distress because he missed his teacher. Elisha picked up Elijah's cloak, which had fallen when he was taken up. Then Elisha returned to the bank of the Jordan River. He struck the water with Elijah's cloak and cried out. It says, where is Yahweh, the God of Elijah? Then the river divided, Elisha went across. Now, how come Elisha was able to do that? Because he listened. He ministered unto Elijah unto the very end. Because what did Elijah tell him? He said, look, you got to be here when I'm taken up. You got to see me be taken up. All right? And ultimately, this was able to work for him because he had faith. Faith is not just like a New Testament like concept. All right? Faith always existed. But continuing on, it says, and Elisha went across. When the group of prophets from Jericho saw from a distance what happened, they exclaimed, Elijah's spirit rests upon Elisha, that double portion. or double share, and they went to meet him and bowed to the ground before him, which is a sign of reverence. Sir, they said, just say the word, and 50 of our strongest men will search the wilderness for your master. Perhaps the spirit of Yahweh has left him on some mountain or in some valley. No, Elisha said, don't send him, because he saw him be taken up. It says 17, which ultimately, by the way, that was a prelude to how the elect of the nation of Israel is going to receive salvation. All right, because people is going to see us be beamed up. That's what's in Wisdom of Solomon chapter 5 verses 1 and 2. All right, and I think it's also in Wisdom of Solomon the 3rd chapter, if I'm not mistaken, the first couple of verses. All these people that mocked us, they talk shit, they think we wasting our time, we don't do nothing for the community. They're going to see us be beamed up. Lord willing, we endure to the end. I hope I'm a part of the elect. So NLT verse 17, but they kept urging him until they shamed him into agreeing, and he finally said, all right, send them. So 50 men searched for 3 days, but did not find Elijah, which Elisha was going to know the outcome of that anyway. They was just being annoying, right? Elisha was still at Jericho when they returned. Didn't I tell you not to go, he asked? Now it goes into what? Elisha's first miracles. All right? So now we're going to get into that. But I want to read this. All right? I'm going to X this out. So I typed in Elisha supernatural Bible verses, right? Because I was preparing a lesson. So it says Elisha was a major Old Testament prophet known for his supernatural ministry, performing twice as many recorded miracles as his predecessor Elijah. His most profound and supernatural Bible verses encompass requesting a double portion of anointing, seeing the unseen spiritual realm, and miraculous healings. It says requesting the double portion. Right, I read that in 2 Kings 2 and 9 and 10. That's what he asked for before Elijah was taken up, right? It says, yep, the chariots of fire, 2 Kings 6 and 15. Let's see. I just want to make sure this is the KJV, because sometimes they be having like the NLT version. I mean, not NLT, NIV. I don't really read the NIV like that, because I got to make sure the wording is on point. All right. But, yeah, let me get that myself. This is 2 Kings 6 and 15, right? 2 Kings 6 and 15. It says, and when the servant of the man of Yahweh was risen early and gone forth, it says, behold, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. Talking about the chariots, talking about the angels. Because when you read in 2nd Ezra 8 and 21, I believe, either 1st or 2nd Ezra in the Apocrypha, Old Testament, 8 and 21, there's an innumerable amount of angels, all right? We don't know how many angels the Most High through Yahushua created. Only the Father knows that. All right? But continuing on, it says, verse 17, and Elisha prayed. That's the key thing. When men of the Lord got these supernatural abilities, they did these supernatural miracles, aka spiritual power, they prayed for it first. All right? And it was able to happen because they had faith. Continuing on. And Elisha prayed and said, Yahweh, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And Yahweh opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. Psalms 34 and 7. The angels of the Lord encampeth around them that fear him. Who's the them that fear Yahweh and Yahushua? The elect of the nation of Israel. All right? So now, let's go down. So it says 2 Kings, chariots of fire, 2 Kings 6:15 through 17. When surrounded by a terrifying enemy army, Elisha's servant panicked. Elisha prayed for Yahweh to open his servant's eyes to the supernatural realm, revealing the angelic army fighting on their behalf. Let's go down here. So that's number 2. Let's go to 3. It says the miracle of the floating axe head. It says 2 Kings 6 verse 5 through 7. So now let's read that. 2 Kings 6 verse 5 through 7, but let's start at verse 1. I'm reading this in the NLT version. All right. 2 Kings 6 and 1, the floating axe head. So it goes on to say, one day the group of prophets came to Elisha and told him, as you can see, this place where we met with you is too small. Let's go down to the Jordan River where there are plenty of logs. There we can build a new place for us to meet. All right, he told them, go ahead. Please come with us, someone suggested. I will, he said. So he went with them. When they arrived at the Jordan, they began cutting down trees. But one of them was cutting a tree. His axe head fell into the river. Oh, sir, he cried. It was a borrowed axe. Where did it fall? The man of Yahweh asked. It says, when he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it into the water at that spot. Then the axe head floated to the surface. Grab it, Elisha said. And the man reached out and grabbed it. Now let's read this. The miracle of the floating axe head. 2 Kings chapter 6 verses 5 through 7. It says, when a borrowed axe head fell into the Jordan River, Elisha performed a miracle to defy the natural laws of physics. All right. Now here's the 4th one. Raising the Shulamite son. Let's get that in 2 Kings chapter 4 verses 32 to 35. 2 Kings chapter 4. Let's go on down. NLT version. I like the NLT. 2 Kings chapter 4 verse 32 on down. It says, when Elisha arrived, the child was indeed dead, lying there on the prophet's bed. He went in alone and shut the door behind him and prayed to Yahweh. You noticing a pattern, right? Before men of the Lord did supernatural things and did divine miracles and had spiritual power, what did they always do first? They prayed for it. All right? Continuing on. It says, then he laid down on the child's body, placing his mouth on the child's mouth, his eyes on the child's eyes, and his hands on the child's hands. And as he stretched out on him, the child's body began to grow warm again. Because when you die, your body get cold. Ain't no spirit in the body heating it up. Elisha got up, walked back and forth across the room once, and then stretched himself out again on the child. This time, the boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. All right? So he raised somebody from the dead. This ain't just New Testament. This is in the Old Testament too. But it's for somebody else. So it says, rising the Shulamite son. 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 32 to 35. After the son of a prominent Shulamite woman died, Elisha prayed and stretched himself out over the boy, miraculously bringing him back to life. Right? Resurrected him from the dead through the power of Yahweh. All right? Next one is number 5. It says healing Naaman of leprosy. 2 Kings chapter 5 verses 10 through 14. We're going to get that one. All right. So next chapter. Let me just go down. Next chapter. So 2 Kings chapter 5. We're going to start at verse 1 though. 2 Kings chapter 5 verse 1. The healing of Naaman. Right. It says the king of ARAM had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him Yahweh had given ARAM great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. Right? You ever see people that have vitiligo? That's leprosy, but it's different stages of it. You could be a clean leopard, like a original looking Edomite. They're clean leopards. All right. And then you can have people that have like that cow kind of looking skin, and what they call today vitiligo, right? So it goes on to say he suffered from leprosy. At the time, the Aramean raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day the girl said to her mistress, "I wish my master would go to see the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy." So Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said. "Go and visit the prophet." The king of Aram told him, "I will send a letter of introduction for you to take to the king of Israel." So Naaman started out carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. So he was rich. Imagine how much that would be today. That would be insane. But verse 6, it says, "The letter to the king of Israel said, with this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy." It says, when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in dismay and said, "Am I God that I can give life and take it away? Why is this man asking me to heal someone with leprosy? I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me." But when Elisha, the man of Yahweh, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent this message to him: "Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger out to him with this message: "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored, and you will be healed of your leprosy." But Naaman became angry and stalked away. "I thought he would certainly come out to meet me," he said. "I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of Yahweh, his God, and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana, and the Pharpar better than any of the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed?" So Naaman turned and went away in rage. But his officers tried to reason with them and said, "Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him." And when he says simply, "Go and wash and be cured," so Naaman went down to the Jordan River, dipped himself 7 times as the man of Yahweh had instructed him, which is Elisha, and his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. You see that? So you want to always hearken unto a true prophet. It says, "Then Naaman and his entire party went back to find the man of Yahweh," which is Elisha. They stood before him, and Naaman said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. So please accept a gift from your servant." But Elisha replied, "As surely as Yahweh lives, whom I serve, I will not accept any gifts." Because it's not about what Elisha told him to do. It's about the power of Yahweh through Elisha telling him what to do to cure leprosy. All right? Continuing on, it says, "And though Naaman urged him to take the gift, Elisha refused. Then Naaman said, 'All right, but please allow me to load 2 of my mules with earth from this place, and I will take it back home with me. From now on, I will never again offer burnt offerings or sacrifices to any other god except Yahweh." You see that? So there you go. It says, yeah, so that's pretty much it. So now, let's see the next one. So it says the healing of leprosy, 2 Kings 5:10-14. It says, Naaman, the commander of the Aramean army, sought Elisha for healing. Elisha instructed him to dip in the muddy Jordan River 7 times, resulting in total physical restoration. All right. So that's it with that. So let's see what else they got. Also, let me just read this. I should have read it earlier. Concerning the axe head in 2 Kings 6, right? It says, details 3 remarkable stories about the prophet Elisha. The miracle of the floating axe head. Elisha blinding the Aramean army with supernatural protection and the severe siege of famine in Samaria. It says, the floating axe head. It says, while cutting wood near the Jordan River, a prophet in training dropped a borrowed iron axe head into the water. Elisha threw a stick into the water, causing the heavy iron to float so it could be recovered. All right. And then it goes into like different things. You know, like you read 2 Kings 6, the siege of famine in Samaria. Brothers always bring this out. You know, verse 24. So it's saying verses 24 through 33. Later, Ben-Hadad of Aram besieged Samaria, causing a horrific, famine where food prices skyrocketed. The same thing gonna happen in America, but on a worse level. That's why we bring this point out. An extreme desperation set in. The king of Israel blamed Elisha for the suffering and saw his life. All right, so you can read 2 Kings about that account, but you know, that's pretty much it, man. You know, these powers that you read about that men of the Lord had, Romans 15:4 says the things written aforetime is written for our learning. That through the comfort of the scriptures, we're going to have hope. So one day, all of us brothers, we're going to have this power. Lord willing, we are part of the elect. Shalom.